The power of yoga, what it's actually designed to do. Now, a lot of us understand yoga from the physical perspective, from asanas, postures, getting flexible, getting strong, doing bendy poses. And it's really cool, because you get to wring out the stress, wring out the tension, open the body up, get some more flow. This is really nice. It's a very useful thing to do, but it doesn't actually change what's driving the contraction, the tensions, the lack of flow in the first place. Hi, I'm Breadner. This is YogaCoach. This is a channel for yoga teachers that want to step up in their teaching, that want to transition from the studio to online, and who want to be at the leading edge of how yoga moves into the future. It's really exciting for us. If it's exciting for you, click on the subscribe button, hit the bell, and you'll be notified every time there's a new video coming out. Beyond the physical body, we have the subtle body. And this is where the real magic happens. This is the home of most of Tantra, Kriya Yoga, Laya Yoga. It's where the big guys say that the power of actually yoga really sits. It's the fastest route. It's the rocket path to get you to a state of yoga. What do I mean by a state of yoga? A state of singularity, recognizing the underlying unity of everything. You might want to call that God. You might want to call that science, might call it the quantum field. In yoga, we would call it Brahman. But how do we connect back to that? And what do we mean by connecting to it? And where do we disconnect to start with? Well, let's come back to embryology, where it all started. At about the end of the 14th day, this silver streak appears, kind of out of nowhere, and it just pops up in the embryo. And from that, it's subtle in nature, but what forms is the notochord. And the notochord is the cord of intelligence that's connecting us back into Brahman, back into singularity. And before that 14th day, all the cells are splitting, but there's very little differentiation. There's very little intelligence in it. But as soon as this happens and the notochord forms, all the cells gravitate around this incredible silver streak, this silver thin thread of light. And it communicates the intelligence to the cells, and they migrate off and do what they're meant to do to build this. So what happens is, instead of just splitting cells, you get folding, and you start to get the planes of the body, top, bottom, left, right, inside, outside. And the first thing that folds is what they call the neural tube. And the neural tube goes on to become is your Sushumna Nadi. And on a physical level, the top of it becomes the brain, and the spinal cord and the sacrum at the bottom. So your consciousness gets centered along your spinal cord and brain. And then from the neural tube, there's two crests on top, and they break away and they become, in yogic terms, Ida and Pingala. In physical terms, autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic. But what's cool about that is it allows us, these two channels oscillate, the polarity of them, about every 88 minutes. And why that's important is because it allows us to have the experience of duality. And duality means we can have experiences. The problem with that is our mind hijacks the consciousness via the senses and gets hopelessly entangled in objects of preference and trying to move away from things that we don't like. Collectively, we would call it our identity. And our consciousness then is really blinkered into a very narrow framework. And then we set up our life trying to make everything fit that narrow framework. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And when it doesn't, we suffer. So what yoga says, in the practice of it, in a very practical sense, saying you've made a big error here, right? We call it avidya. There's ignorance. This is not who you truly are. You've forgotten. So the process of yoga is reverse engineering and remembering who we are from the perspective of coming back into singularity, back into yoga, back into the God, whatever you want to call it, come back into that place. So when we work with the subtle body these four main nadis, Brahma Nadi, Sushumna Nadi, Ida and Pingala. This is very powerful. As I mentioned, it's the home most of Kriya, Tantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, and it's what Yogananda called the fastest route possible to get back to the remembrance of who we truly are. So what can we do? Well, we have to draw the senses back, right? Really important. Untangle them, unhook it, draw it back. So we have certain practices to do that, certain breathing practices that will help us do that, certain rhythms of breathing that will help us do that. When we get it back, what do? Right? Because with this Brahmanadi, this cord of intelligence, it's subtle in nature. So that presents a problem for most of us because physically we can't see it. So we have to feel it. We have to feel these subtle channels. Where it runs is from the top fontanelle, where the consciousness comes in, and then it anchors in the middle of the pelvic floor. And then from there, we have what we call Khanda at the front, which is like a cave or a bowl, but it's the point where the 72,000 energy pathways, the nadis, all meet. So it gets distributed from there throughout the whole of the body. So what we're trying to do is draw that consciousness back in and redistribute it. Instead of going out into the world through the senses, bring it back and centralize it, balance it out through practices to balance these two channels, Ida and Pingala, because when they're balanced, the mind and the senses don't know what to do. The mind kind of goes into a daydream, a neutral gear, and that allows us then to magnetize our consciousness into Sushumna and Brahmanadi. And a certain Kriya that we learn to do that. All these practices are coming in further videos. We're setting a framework up here. Then we want to bring our consciousness back up into Ajna. From Ajna, that's when yoga really happens, because we want to go from there, mindfulness, to actually going beyond the mind and tapping into a greater intelligence. When you tap into that greater intelligence, it's a total game changer. Because of, instead of engaging with the world through information, through recycled knowledge that you've gathered through your perception of the world and through the senses and the mind, you actually go beyond the mind and you tap into the field of potential and possibility. It's no thing and everything at once. So what happens is you get this insight, uncommon insights. You start to see the world in ways that other people don't see. You start to get inspired, and when you take that out into the world and share it, it's inspired living. We all want this. We all want to feel inspired. This is the gift of yoga. This is the process, and we're going to teach you all the different stages, step by step, on how to get to that place where you can have inspired living. The next video is talking about preparing the body, first of all, for that process, because we work from the gross to the subtle, and we're actually preparing the body as a gateway to the subtle. We're opening the physical body through the subtle body. So check out that video, pre-meditative asana, and let's all put in place this incredible system of yoga, the power of it, so we can all live an extraordinary life, uncommon life, inspired living, and take it out into the world to help others become inspired. If you found it useful, like it, share the information, and we'll see you on the next video. One-handed namaste, shaka, peace.